It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul's asking for your help in redesigning Microsoft. What's wrong? What's right? He'll also talk about the latest news from Google and a lot more. Windows Weekly is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott, episode 208, recorded May 12th, 2011. Fake Hustle. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Go to Assist Express. Giving tech support in person is expensive and time-consuming. Save time and money and look like a hero to clients or colleagues with Go to Assist Express. For a free 30-day trial, visit gotoassist.com/windows. And by Carbonite. Backing up the files on your PC or Mac is safe and easy with Carbonite. For a free trial plus 2 free months with purchase, go to carbonite.com. Offer code WINDOWS. And by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to create a high-quality website or blog. For a free 14-day trial, go to squarespace.com/windows. And be sure to check out their annual plans for savings of up to 20% off. It's time for Windows Weekly. Leo Laporte here, Paul Thurrott there, and beautiful Dedham. And welcome, Paul, to the program. It's good to see you.
You too.
This is the show that covers all your Microsoft needs. You've got your Xbox 360. By the way, we're going to E3.
Yes, I heard that.
But I think we're going to... last year, the big press show, the big press conference, Presso, as we call them in the trade, the big Presso.
No, we don't.
No, I hate that word. And the only people who use it are PR flacks. We say, we've got a Presso. I think it stands for press opportunity. I don't know what it stands for.
You know my favorite out-of-date condensation or term or tech term or whatever it is, and you still hear this sometimes from the guys at Microsoft or their PR company. They'll say, I'll send you a Schedule Plus. Schedule Plus, of course, being the... Schedule Plus was the predecessor of Outlook. It was Outlook before there was email attached to it.
We'll say, I'll send you a telegram.
Yeah, exactly. I'll send you a telex.
Telex. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So let's
Schedule Plus.
Let me pop the stack. Okay, Schedule Plus, Presso. The big event last year, had to pop it 3 times. The big event last year, and I hope you are following this. Many people don't realize this is a stack-oriented show. First in,
also, yes, an endless series of non sequiturs.
First in, last out. So just popping the stack
this
back
is how
up.
Black holes are made, Leo. Yeah. Right.
I think we have a show title. The Microsoft, the big press event of E3 last year was Connect, and in fact, I got up 5 in the morning to do.
You know what the big one is going to be this year?
Yes, I do.
We still have Connect.
Well, it's funny because Microsoft and Sony have their conferences on Monday, and Nintendo's having its Tuesday morning, and then the trade show opens its doors at noon on Tuesday. So Leo, trying to save a little money, said, "Let's just skip Monday." What could Microsoft and Sony say that could possibly be of interest?
Wow.
Well, no, they shot their wad, both of them. Move and Connect last year.
That's interesting. We have I play basketball, and we have a term called fake hustle, which is where you pretend to be playing defense. Or you pretend like you were just about to go get the ball before it went out of bounds, and I was going to dive for it, but I didn't want to hurt the other guy. So what you're saying is Microsoft and Sony are going to have fake PR about nothing. In other words, there's going to be a lot of horns and confetti, but at the end of the day,
what are they going to say? Meanwhile, Nintendo's going to announce its next console,
which is actually interesting.
So I made an executive decision. I said, okay, coverage begins Tuesday, not Monday.
All right.
Have I made a mistake, Mr. Paul Thurrott, expert on Microsoft?
I don't have very good contacts with the Xbox guys, so I don't know. But there are no big rumors about anything coming up.
There'll be new games. I mean, there's always new games.
Yeah, there'll be. Yeah, and I think they'll talk about Connect momentum. And you know how much I love momentum talks, so that'll be fun.
We've got the Mo.
I think that's it.
Yeah, but to pop the stack one more time, this guy here is Paul Thurrott. He's the editor-in-chief of the SuperSite for Windows, SuperSite.com. He is news editor for Windows IT Pro. He's the author of Windows Vista secrets, Windows 7 secrets, Windows
You know
Phone
what?
secrets.
I'm not going to let you get this back on track.
How about them Knicks?
I appreciate the effort.
How are the Celtics doing this year?
Yikes. They're done.
Shouldn't have brought that up, should I?
No, it's okay. They went out like men, unlike a certain team from Los Angeles. But
you're right, though.
You know, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
They're getting old.
But you know, there's nothing like the parquet floor. That's what I got to say. You got to play on the parquet, baby. It's a privilege to play where Larry Bird played. Popping the stack once again. It's time for Windows Weekly. So we cover Xbox, we cover Zune, yeah, I don't know.
Someone
we cover Windows Home Server. We cover We cover Windows. We cover Office, and today we're going to cover all of that because that's what this show is all about. We bring you Microsoft news when everyone else does not.
Wow. I don't know what everyone else is doing. Are there other Microsoft podcasts?
Oh, God, I'm sure there must be one or two. You know, one of the things those guys aren't going to do, though, is put together a list of things that are wrong with Microsoft that we can fix. Nobody's going to do that, only you. Are you? What is this list? Tell me about this list.
Well, I haven't made it yet, but I actually inspired by a friend, a former Microsoft employee. He said, you need to write up something about what's wrong with Microsoft. You know, what are list the top 10 things and then how they can fix that, you know? And I said, it's a really good idea. But I said, the problem with making a list like that is if I come up with such a list, which would be easy enough, I'll get hundreds of responses from people who will say, you forgot this,
right,
or you forgot this, you know, that kind of thing. So I either had the inspired or deranged idea to ask this question on Twitter, and of course got many, many responses. So I need to sort through that stuff, and it varies from the ludicrous to the inspired, actually, in some ways.
I think it's brave of you to use Twitter for this.
Well, I don't think of it like that. I think it's pragmatic. I mean, there are some good ideas out there.
Well, of course, that was one of the things people said early on about Twitter is what a great way to crowdsource things like this, answers. Yeah. And I think it potentially still is, but there's also the signal to noise has gone way down.
Oh, no, there's always going to be a couple of jokers. But actually, I have to say, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I do appreciate the responses at all anyway. I mean, some people misconstrued it. I think my early version of the title was something like how Microsoft can save its business or whatever. And as we've discussed in the past, I think Microsoft as a business has a long and fruitful future. But the thing I'm worried about is not so much how Microsoft can fix the financials. It's how Microsoft can fix, its position in the market and its standing in the tech industry, its products, the things that I really care about. I'm doing what I do now because at one point after, really being pretty disdainful of Microsoft and its products for many years, caught an early look at Windows 95, and I said, these guys finally got it. This is something I can rally around. It's exciting and interesting.
95 really was a big step forward, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
You were an Amiga guy at that time.
Right. It was the first thing I had seen, aside from, I always liked the Mac stuff, but the Mac stuff was always too expensive for me.
Right.
And I think that Windows 95 was the first thing I saw that gave me that same vibe that this is where things are going. People like Andrew Schulman and others later proved that Windows 95 wasn't the technical leap forward that Microsoft was trying to position it as, but what it really was more of a user interface or user experience leap forward, and it did get people into 32-bit computing, and obviously the market took off from there. So, I don't think we're ever going to see that level of excitement, as we did with Windows 95 again. But except for one thing, of course, we do see that almost every single time Apple releases anything, or
yeah.
And there's a certain level of excitement, I think, that greets a lot of the Google stuff. So there are other companies who are able to do that. And what I'd like to see is Microsoft be able to do that again. So
it's kind of the nature of the tech industry, isn't it? That these are.
I don't know. That's like is it? I don't know. The tech industry isn't that old. I mean, the personal computer industry. So certainly, it's the nature of business that as companies get successful, and mature, you basically change from being an innovator and a forward thinker to being someone who's protecting a market that's very lucrative for you. And it's understandable, but as we've discussed, I'm not hugely interested in that. There are a lot of big companies out there that make products outside of the tech industry that are not interesting to me or to you or to people listening to this. And they, whatever they are, oil companies or whatever, companies generate money, and that's neat. But I'm a technology enthusiast, and what I want from Microsoft is to be enthused by what they're doing. And there obviously, and I should point out, there are areas where I am. I mean, of course, Microsoft does do some great stuff, but I think the way things have evolved is they've been much more successful as a tech company serving business than as a tech company serving consumers. And unfortunately for Microsoft, the consumer end is where all the excitement is.
Yeah. So how does this apply to your list? Are you saying how do we bring the excitement back? Or how do we, I mean, because nobody's complaining about Microsoft's profits.
Right. But I don't, again, I don't care about that. So I want Windows 8 to be exciting. I want, Office to be exciting. Actually, Office is, within the context of Office, is pretty exciting, I guess. But
it's as exciting as a word processor can be.
Yeah, as exciting as something like that can be.
Yeah.
You don't have to look far to understand what I'm looking for, right? Because Apple does it all the time, and it's
a shame to have to compare yourself though to Apple in a case like this.
Okay, but it's a combination of picking the right battles and then really nailing it, doing the right thing by your users. We've already beaten Microsoft to death this past year or whatever. There are many places where they make mistakes, but there are areas where they get it right. But I feel like this is a company that has squandered their lead because they've too often tried to emulate the success of Windows in other markets, and it's never really worked out. It's worked out in markets that are tangential to Windows, things like Office and Windows Server, of course, but that model has never proven successful in markets, that are further afield from Windows than those. So, I don't know. So what I'm not looking for are very specific things. Some people have said things like they need to make, one guy said, I want to see Windows 8, boot up in 8 seconds or something like that. And that would be great, but that doesn't save Microsoft, right? So
well, it could help.
I guess.
Is it one thing or is it an aggregate of a ton of stuff?
That's why I said 10 things. I will tell you that one of the things that will be on this list, because I'm writing it and this is very important to me, is that Microsoft needs to cut back on the depth of the hierarchy of the leadership of the company. They have too many levels.
That's the problem.
And what that leads to is this slowness that grips the company. It is unable to do anything in any amount of time. We'll talk about the Google I/O stuff in a bit, but one of the things that really struck me was when they were talking about Chrome, he said, we moved Chrome to a 6-week development cycle. And there's no doubt that the Internet Explorer team at Microsoft was influenced by that decision. They've moved to a much quicker development cycle than they were on before. But, Microsoft is locked in this 3-year development cycle for its core products. And that's probably fine for businesses. But what I'm suggesting is that it needs to move much more quickly.
Yeah.
And if it's going to continue to sell this kind of legacy software, it needs to offer it in a form that emulates the development of web software or web services and thus is updated on a continual basis all the time. And that maybe they could do what Chrome does and split it off in a way that people who are enthusiasts or individuals can sort of subscribe to this thing where new features are added, even if they're experimental, on an ongoing basis, and just keep people interested and engaged, interested and engaged. I also feel like Microsoft needs to ask explicitly for feedback on things well in advance of when they do. I feel like with Windows 7, and I think it's going to happen again with Windows 8, that they're going to basically drop this thing in our lap and say, here it is. We're interested in your bug fixes, but this thing is feature complete. And my argument is that they need to have a much broader engagement with actual customers before they decide what that thing is. They must do it, and they claim to do it, but I've never heard from anyone who's ever been a part of this or have heard of it, heard a rumor of it. There's been no, Microsoft seeded some little customer group with a version of Windows 7 that has one Windows 8 feature because they were looking to see what they thought about it. You've never hear anything like that. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it needs to happen a lot more than it does, if it happens at all. And I have my doubts about that. So things like that, kind of conceptual things, ways Microsoft can change the way it goes about doing things in order to better compete in the world as it is now.
You know, a thought struck me when you were saying that one of the problems was the long lead time, long turnaround time on Windows and shortening that. And
Yep.
I think about that, and I think about the fact that Microsoft is really, in technology, a mainstream old line business. And developmentally, that's kind of where it sits. And then I think about Ford, because Ford had some of these same problems. I mean, talk about a mature industry, the auto industry. How does Ford get the excitement back when all the excitement went offshore to European and Japanese cars? How does Ford turn around its lead time? Because lead time is a real big issue. And they brought in a CEO, very smart guy, who really focused on those exact issues and said, how do we solve this problem? It is possible. I think maybe simply replacing Steve Ballmer with somebody who can take on these top things and with some fresh thinking might be all that's needed. What about that?
Right. I've tried to avoid the Steve Ballmer be replaced kind of discussion, but
I think the time has come.
Right.
I think it's becoming more and more apparent that he is not going to lead Microsoft into the next decade.
When you say things like I just said, Microsoft has too much corporate hierarchy and it can't make decisions. You know, ultimately, if you're looking for the responsibility for that, you always have to go back to the guy in charge, right? Arguably, if you were to make any complaint about this or any other company, I mean, at some point, there has to be the place where the buck stops here. And it's always going to be the CEO, isn't it? So,
yeah, and it's easy to blame the CEO.
It's easy to blame the CEO, but I would also point out that in this case, you know, Steve Ballmer has been a Microsoft employee, I think, since the mid-1980s. He's been groomed, you know, as a friend of Bill Gates from college to be in upper-level management throughout his career. The problem with Steve Ballmer, perhaps, maybe the same thing that was wrong with with Bill Gates at the end there, was just that he had been around for so long and had known such success doing the same thing over and over again.
Sclerotic.
Yeah, it's hard to
think.
He may not be able to think outside of that thing, you know, that got them there. So, yes, I mean, I think the success of Apple in particular, because Apple's been around as long as Microsoft, maybe a year longer, I can't remember the details, or a year less, is that Apple operates as a group of small startups, and it still has a very aggressive corporate culture. You know, I get this, and I don't mean to, you know, I have a lot of friends at Microsoft, and I respect virtually everyone I know at Microsoft. I mean, I know they all try very hard and want to change the world and all that, but I get this notion of Microsoft as a whole where it's a people punching time clocks, essentially, coming in, doing the 9-to-5 thing, leaving and going home, and
that's not going to make it.
They don't think about work anymore. So
I may not be true, though. I don't want to, you know what?
This is a generalization, but it's a huge company. So the problem is, even if what I said is not true of a good percentage of that company, it is true of a good percentage of that company.
I'm going to defend them. Because you and I both know that the rank and file in Microsoft is energetic, excited. They're there because they want to make a difference. I think it's Ballmer and some key middle management that needs to be scraped out of there so that these smart young people can do what they want to do.
You can only be denied so many times before you just give up. And that's how that time clock punching culture starts.
Then get rid of them too. But I know there are a lot of good people.
These were guys who went in probably wide-eyed and idealistic and no. Or, you know, you can imagine, you can see it everywhere, actually, Microsoft. You know, someone will come in to some new position, some division, and they think, I'm going to change this place and I'm going to make everything right, and then they get beaten down by the system.
I think of people like Scoble who went in there with that exact point of view and left after a couple of years saying, he never said anything bad about Microsoft to his credit. But reading between the lines, I think he and a lot of people come to Microsoft hoping to make a difference. But it starts at the top, and with the top guy, and then that layer of management beneath him. If I'm on the Microsoft board,
it's like this big glob of fat on the outside of this company, and it's you know, years and years ago. It's funny to think on this. I heard the phrase, and this was with regards to hiring at Microsoft, that they only hired what was the phrase? It was the best and the brightest, you know. And I remember being on a bus full of these guys going to Comdex in 1994 or 5, whatever year it was, and looking at these guys and thinking, you know, how interesting it must be to be part of this at Microsoft. Microsoft is so big now that there's no way they're just hiring the best and the brightest. They're pretty much hiring, people with heartbeats and college degrees. So
you got a heartbeat? We got a job.
Well, it's just too big. So again, I know that there are people there who care and want to change the world, want to do the right thing. I just feel like there's too much structure on top of them.
I agree. And I think we're both pointing the same way. I know you're reluctant to say that, but look what Google did. Larry Page said, "Okay, Eric, you're done." I don't know if he's the right CEO.
But they made that move that Microsoft can't make, which is we need to shake this thing up and do things in a different way so that we can make decisions more quickly.
Yep.
So we've talked about this before. Google is a hyper fast version of Microsoft. So within 10 years, they did what it took Microsoft, say 20 years or more, 25 years, whatever, to reach that size and that power. And they already see in their own culture that things are slowing down. That it's decision by committee, that nothing gets, people have ideas, but they never go anywhere because, they can't get anything done. And so they are trying to shake things up. And I think that's, Microsoft needs to shake things up.
All right.
Anyway, so with this thing, I'll probably call this thing How Microsoft Can Fix Microsoft, just in, in keeping with the titles of my previous articles. But so anyone who's listening to this, if you have ideas along these lines or have thoughts along these lines, please email me, and then I'll try to put this stuff together sometime in the next week or so.
You sound sad. Like you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be fixing them.
I don't want to have to. Yeah. Well, I can't fix them. I don't. Actually, I should. And I've said this before. I'm sure. This has come up many times. The biggest one was during the early days of Windows Vista, when I would talk to these guys all the time, guys in the Windows division, guys in the PR team, and I would say, when are you going to stop taking sucker punches from Apple and these stupid commercials that they make and stand up for yourself and defend yourself? And, I don't know, and it took them a year. It was a really long amount of time to let the conversation be so one-sided. But at one point, someone finally came back to me and said, well, you keep complaining about how we never do anything. How would you have us fix this? And I said, whoa, I'm a critic. I don't have answers. I just have, I have complaints,
I have an answer.
Yeah, unfortunately, or whatever, better or worse, my job is fairly limited. So I can point out the problem, I guess, but
there's got to be somebody out there who could, it's a real challenge. I have a huge respect for people like Alan Mulally, who one of the problems Ford had is they kept putting Fords in charge, family members in charge.
Yes, exactly.
And so here comes an outsider, an engineer, which I think is very interesting. I think it does take a certain kind of mind to do this. And takes to march in and say, you're out, and say we're gonna move this ship. This is executive compensation is through the roof. We know these guys make a ridiculous amount of money, but this is why, if you are that good, it can make billions of dollars in difference to the company.
Within the context of Microsoft, another thing that we've discussed in the past, because it was a news item at the time, was how do you replace a guy like Bill Gates? And who in the industry exactly, who could work at Microsoft, has the same amount of influence? Well, it
wasn't Ray Ozzie.
Well, that's the thing. But when you look at Ray Ozzie coming in, you think, well, okay, this guy is he's a contemporary of Bill Gates. He is a technical wizard and a genius, smart guy. He bought into the cloud at a very early stage in his career. We should have maybe noted the warnings a little more strongly about how he kept releasing the same product again and again under different names. But whatever, who could, come in and take over for Bill Gates? So Ray Ozzie didn't work out. And now what? Now that we know that didn't work, obviously you can't have a one-to-one replacement in the same way that you're never going to find a guy to replace Steve Jobs at Apple. And then further down the line, in the same way that you're never going to find two idealistic wonder kids like the Sergey Brin and Larry Page at Google. How do you do it? So a lot of people are saying we need to get rid of Steve Ballmer. Okay, but with who? Who can run this company? It's a much tougher question, and there's no real way to answer it because we'll never know unless it happens how they would do. So it's very easy to say, yeah, Steve Ballmer's the problem, but now what? We didn't replace Steve Bill Gates, rather, very easily or very well.
No.
How would we do this? I don't know.
I don't know. We don't have to know. We're critics. That's all.
Right. Just accept the limitations of your job.
We just say no. We don't say yes. It's not our job. Hey, we're going to take a break, come back. Of course, the big story of the week, we buried the lead, is Microsoft purchasing Skype. Here's a chance to really slander Steve Ballmer or not. We'll find out in just a bit. Paul Thurrott is here. By the way, your questions, your suggestions for Paul's list, his Twitter handle is @THUROTT.
Or that at gmail.com is fine, too.
Or Thurrott@gmail.com. If you have a way to fix Microsoft, what is your suggestion? Meanwhile, let me talk a little bit about our friends at Citrix and how you can be a support hero if you're in the support business. And I think anybody who listens to this show does support it, if only for family and friends. As we were talking about before, as the show began, is helping people get their stuff fixed. And sometimes you end up on a phone call where you're thinking, God, if I could just reach out my hands and fix that computer myself, I wouldn't have to. It'd take me 1/10 of the time. It's remote access. Remote access in its most useful guise, and that's what GoToAssist does. Now, I know there are a lot of choices out there. This is a very competitive space, but nothing is better than GoToAssist Express. It's fast, it's easy to use, and it has features for the Support Pro to make you look like a hero. Things like unattended access. It's very easy for your clients, even if they don't have it installed ahead of time, to install it. Just 2 clicks of the mouse, and 30 seconds later, you're in and fixing their system. And from then on, it's trivial. You can do 8 sessions at once, which makes you much more productive. In fact, on average, GoToAssist Express users say they're getting about a 40% increase in their support productivity. That's like 2 extra work days a week. That's a lot more time to play Call of Duty. GoToAssist.com. Click the Try It Free button and use the promo code WINDOWS, and you could try this free for 30 days. Free, unlimited. GoToAssist.com. Actually, I guess we have a URL. I'm sorry. GoToAssist.com/Windows. You don't have to do the Try It Free button. We'll get you there directly. GoToAssist.com/Windows. If you haven't tried this yet, you may be using something else. Just give it a try for 30 days. And I think you'll find a way to change your support structure, to turn yourself into a hero. Skype. What a shock. I mean, the rumors were flying that Google or Facebook would buy Skype. Google didn't make any sense. They already have similar technology. They don't need it. In fact, they bought Gizmo not so long ago.
So does Microsoft, by the way.
So does Microsoft. It's called MSN. I don't understand really why Microsoft bought it. Facebook made a lot of sense. So I got a theory, Paul Thurrott.
Yeah.
My theory is Microsoft bought it for BPOS so that they'd have a
but they already have something for BPOS.
Well,
so
isn't this better? But then here's the second part of it.
Actually, no, Leo, it's not. And that's what cracks me up.
Well, here's the second part. They're a minority stakeholder, but a big stakeholder in Facebook. Maybe they license some of it back to Facebook because that's who could use this more than anybody.
So, okay. So my first theory, and I still adhere to this in some ways, is that they did it to prevent some other company, I would guess Facebook at this point, because it appears Google didn't actually want Skype. But let's...
Facebook's the only, but not $8.5 billion. Facebook couldn't even pay it, and I don't think $8.5 billion.
Right, but Microsoft could, so that's how you keep it out of their hands, right? I mean,
that's
Microsoft is a company that has $50 billion in cash-like assets, right? So $8.5 billion is really not that much money. And let's face it, it was just sitting there doing nothing anyway. I put a link in the show notes from Business Insider, who noted that the cost to Microsoft for this, it works out to $14.70 per Skype user.
Whoa.
And that this purchase represents 116 days of cash flow for the company. So, they can afford it.
They can afford it.
Consider, maybe how much you make in a year and then divide that by 3 and think about the cars that you've purchased and, of course, the homes you've purchased. Yeah. And I'm sure you think you can afford those things. So, okay. So, no problem there. So they can afford it. I think that's obvious no matter how you want to look at it. They have the cash.
But, I mean, I don't care if you've got billions and billions to spend. If you're throwing it away, you're throwing it away.
Okay. I think they are throwing it away. But I would say that there are 2 primary aspects to this deal that make some sense for Microsoft. The first one is what I already said. They kept this technology out of the hand of a competitor.
So I'm completely wrong. They will not share this with Facebook. In fact, this was the point.
No. Actually, keeping it away from Facebook and then licensing it back to them is a perfectly valid use of this deal. Yeah. I mean, that's fine, right? Because they are partners in a way. The problem for Microsoft, and I would say also for Google, and actually maybe even for Apple eventually, is that Facebook is in some ways a competitor too, right? They are taking eyeballs away from these other companies. People are doing things on Facebook, sharing things on Facebook. And now the ad money is going to Facebook as well. So it makes sense that a company like Facebook, where people update each other and with what they're doing textually, and now with photos, and now with videos.
Imagine if there's just video sitting right there in your Facebook.
Well, but imagine if it was live video. In other words,
exactly.
It's not hard to imagine. I'm sorry, this is not Tron or Logan's Run or something. I mean, it's very easy to imagine Facebook wanting to offer this capability. Right. You can already instant chat. Why not instant video chat or whatever?
Exactly. It's chat roulette, only with your friends, safely.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in some ways, Facebook is like chat roulette because a lot of those friends aren't friends. But okay, so you can see where this would be a big deal for Facebook. So I can see that. I think the other one is that Skype actually is a good brand, And if Microsoft is smart and they don't rename it to Windows Live Skype or some stupid, I know, you think I'm kidding.
BPO Skype.
Yeah, so they know, Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer noted this during the press conference the other day. Skype is a verb, in the same way that I Googled this online or I Googled you online or something. You can say that. You can say I Skype, do you want to Skype or let's Skype? People do say that. That's true.
Yes, they do.
So Microsoft would be wise to not screw around with this brand and maybe put little Skype logo things all over the place, right? In Outlook, in Windows Live Messenger, in Hotmail, in any place where it makes sense. The problem I have, and this is, so to the outside world, I think the things I just said make plenty of sense, and people maybe could nod their heads and say, oh yeah, okay, I get it now. I get it now. The problem is if you know too much about Microsoft, it doesn't make any sense at all. It still doesn't make any sense because Microsoft has technology that I believe, and I want to hear it differently. In fact, I intend to talk to someone from Microsoft about this soon, is I believe that Microsoft already has technology that's superior to Skype and that it is exposed in two primary ways today. One is through Windows Live Messenger, which offers audio and video chatting capabilities, as well as conferencing capabilities with two or more individuals, not just face-to-face. And they have something called Link, which is not a brand new product like people are making it sound, but rather the evolution of unified communications technologies that Microsoft has had for years. And I have to say this because, I just spent a bunch of time talking about how Microsoft does everything wrong. But one of the things that Microsoft has always done right, and they did it with this stuff, is you take technology that previously was really hard to implement, really expensive, and you bring it down market and down market and down market. And that's what you're seeing with Link. So Link provides Windows Live Messenger style chatting capabilities, but also a bunch of other stuff, whiteboarding, shared document editing, shared desktop, shared application, things like that. I've done live meetings with Microsoft over Link, where I can control the other person's desktop and run some server software that I don't have installed locally so I can see what it's like. It's very powerful stuff. So how does Skype improve on that? I think, and as far as Link goes, Link will very soon be available in a very inexpensive package called Office 365. It is, which we've talked about, it is one of the three things in Office 365, right? The other two, the three big things. The other two being Exchange and SharePoint, which everyone has heard of. And then the third piece is Link, which no one's heard of, but Microsoft has actually had something with another name at the company for a long, long time. So it's mature technology. It works really well. So I don't get it. Technically speaking, what does Skype give you? You said you guys have talked about it elsewhere on the TWiT network. What did the conversation come up about Stephen Levy's book Into the Plex and how Google engineers worked to prevent Google from purchasing Skype in the past and their rationale for that? Right. Because it's peer-to-peer technology.
Right.
Didn't scale very well, and thus was not.
I don't know if they're right about that. There's 700 million Skype users. It's scaling okay.
So I guess what I would say is one technical difference, and again, as a semi-layman in this regard, in my understanding of it, between what Microsoft has and what Skype is is that Skype's messaging, communication software is peer-to-peer, whereas Microsoft's requires a server of some kind in the middle.
And peer-to-peer would be an advantage on somebody like Facebook, where you have 600 million users. The fact that Skype can show that it can scale to that size is pretty important. Yes. But, I wrote this in my news article, there are numbers for the number of people that are on Skype, the number of people that do this and that. The number of people that use Windows Live Messenger is over double the number of people that use Skype. Now, not all of them are necessarily doing audio and video chat every single day. So I'd like to, I don't think Microsoft will release numbers for that right now, but it wouldn't surprise me to discover that Microsoft is already delivering as much audio and video chatting via its various services. Oh, I'm sure that's the case.
As was Skype. So again, I have to ask, what was the point, technically speaking? In other words, if you work at Microsoft and you're on the Link team, or you're in Windows Live, and you get this, edict from on high. Maybe they asked them. I don't know how they did it, but now here's Skype. And by the way, Skype's going to be a division at Microsoft, right? These other products are within other divisions. There's actually going to be a Skype division.
Oh, that's not good. That means they'll be shooting at each other.
Right. This is the Ray Ozzie thing all over again. You get this team over here doing this. You get this team over this. There's probably going to be some sort of edict again from on high where, you have to figure out, here, we just bought Skype. We spent a lot of money on it. So figure out how you're going to integrate that into your products. So I imagine I will see Skype buttons everywhere, because you want to promote that logo and the brand. And that's, okay, I guess. You can imagine a Skype button in the Office ribbon, in Outlook or whatever. Okay. But it's unclear how that's different from what's already in there. If you have this infrastructure today, maybe it's lack of infrastructure. Maybe if you have an Exchange set up on the back end today and you want to do all the presence stuff, you need to have a link infrastructure and all that. And maybe Skype lets you do presence without having that infrastructure. Maybe. I don't know. I need to understand the technical differences, and I guess what I'm saying is I just don't get it so far.
You've actually made it worse for me.
Okay.
I thought, oh, this is not so bad. Now it makes no sense.
I just don't. Well, again, when you look at it from the perspective of they can't afford it, and by the way, that money was sitting there doing nothing. They kept it out of the hands of one or more competitors. There are other players.
You think it was a pure defensive play?
Even if it is, right? Even if that's all it is, they do at the end of the day benefit from, the Skype brand is positive, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
I don't expect them to generate many Skype-specific revenues, I guess. I'm not even sure what that means. But I don't know. It puts them in an interesting place where, you have to think from the perspective of the wireless carriers who are actually shouldering the bandwidth burden of what occurs over Skype, that now Microsoft is going to offer this damn thing. And isn't that going to just increase the traffic? And how do they feel about that? And what are the legal ramifications, the technical ramifications? I don't know. This is a big question mark. So I'm not saying it's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. I'm just saying it's maybe a little more nuanced than people have maybe discussed it so far. And I just think it ends up like so many things in life. It's just a question. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
Just one more thing to hate about business is buying a company that provides a product that's great as an anti-competitive move to keep it out of the hands of somebody else, and they're just putting it to sleep. And it happens.
Well, assuming
Twitter just did this with TweetDeck, right? I love TweetDeck.
So did they actually buy TweetDeck?
They bought TweetDeck by offering twice. So here's the story on that. Uber Media, Bill Gross's company, Uber Media, which has 3 or 4 of the big Twitter clients, wanted to buy TweetDeck for $20 million. That would have given it more than 10, maybe even as much as 20% of all Twitter traffic, enough so that they could create a Twitter competitor saying in the same client, you could put your post here and on the new Uber Twitter.
Which allows 280 characters.
Right, exactly. In fact, that was the rumor. So Twitter comes along and says, we'll give you twice as much. Now, if I'm the CEO of TweetDeck, I'm going, yeah, baby, they got 40 million instead of 20.
By the way, for a Twitter client.
For a Twitter client, which I guarantee you disappears.
As good as it may be. But
it's not whether it's good. It's merely that by buying a popular Twitter client, Uber Media would have been a credible threat to Twitter. So Twitter says, good, we'll keep that from happening.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, I mean, look, I understand that's good business, but I think it's shameful. I mean, it just really, it's not good for us. And I do pray that Microsoft does something with Skype. I just think a Skype me button
I think
in Facebook would be huge.
I just don't. So just within Microsoft products, I already mentioned, I think we're going to see Skype logos everywhere. That's fine. I think the Skype as we know it will stick around. It will be.
I hope so. I built a whole network on Skype. Foolish me.
That was their intention all along. By the way, this is Microsoft. These guys have mastered business licensing. One of the fears you should have, and others who use Skype in this context should have, is Microsoft coming down the pike someday and saying, hey, by the way, Skype is free for personal use. It always has been.
Yeah.
But now you can join our software assurance program, and you can license Skype for as many hours as you transmit per week or whatever, and it's a significant amount of money. And that maybe is something you need to.
Well, we've been for that very reason transitioning off Skype, and the new studio will be using something besides Skype. But this just hastens and adds a little prod to that.
We'll see. I wouldn't assume that they're going to do anything evil with it yet. And by the way, I think you might be right that going back and licensing Skype to Facebook would be
huge.
A great way for them to share revenues. He did say, I haven't finished the press conference yet. I'm going to write something up about this eventually, probably in the next day or two. But it was very interesting. When you think about this in the context of previous Microsoft deals, like the Nokia partnership, a lot of people wondered at that time, why didn't Microsoft just merge or buy Nokia? Why did they?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do this partnership? And then when you have something like Skype, why didn't they just partner with them? Why did they buy them? And he actually kind of addressed that. He didn't bring up Nokia, but he said, we do different kinds of deals. And he said, when we looked at this, it just made more sense. Because we looked at an ad sharing deal, he said, with Skype. We talked about that, us supplying our ads. It's one of the many ways that Microsoft could partner with them. And, they looked at the overall business and they looked at the opportunity and they decided it made more sense just to buy them. And so, different deals require different terms and different ways of looking at things and so forth. So we can't assume that these people are just feeble-minded. I mean, they bought them for a reason.
You are feeble-minded, my friend.
Woo! We have $15 billion.
No, I do, and I have to confess, I often am reminded of how feeble-minded I am when I try to suss and figure out the business strategies of companies far superior to my mortal limits. But nevertheless,
I hear you.
I think they're feeble-minded. No, I'm sorry.
Well, look, I clearly have no idea what things are worth. So a Twitter client is somewhat.
What do we know?
$20 million for a
no, 40 turns out, right? So who would have thought?
That's insane.
Makes me wonder why I didn't write a Twitter client. Because it's easy.
I mean, $8.5 billion for a company that eBay had purchased 4 or 5 years earlier.
You know what the funny thing is? eBay made money.
Yeah, because they were still an investor.
They have 30%. So eBay paid $45 a subscriber. 1.7 billion. But because they retained a 30% stake, this sold for such a high price, eBay actually made money.
On the black. Yes, okay.
They made good money.
There is a story here about some group of investors who convinced eBay to let this happen, i.e. them buying it at a lower cost, and they take a write-off and all that, because their belief was that we will be able to turn this thing around and sell it and make more money for you as well. Right. And eBay, I think eBay saw the writing on the wall, and we're going to lose money on this, so why not?
It was a smart move.
Yeah, and it worked out for everybody.
Mark Andreesen made hundreds of millions of dollars on it.
Nice to see him finally make money on Microsoft there. So good for him.
That must kind of make him feel good, because basically, Microsoft killed Netscape.
If I was Mark Andreessen, every time I was in a store and I was buying anything from here on out, I'd say, oh, by the way, Microsoft paid for this. Every time I bought something, I'd buy a car and be like, yeah, Microsoft.
Take that, Bill Gates. Ha ha!
Sure.
Have at you. So we were at Google I/O on Tuesday. That was the first keynote, the Android keynote. Yesterday, Chrome was the topic. They did launch Google Music. I have actually now synced all 8,000 songs on my computer up with Google Music. That means I can play it.
I need to ask them for access to this early so I can write
awesome.
So I assume it's very similar to the Amazon stuff.
It's different because Amazon's selling music, right? So Amazon really wants to sell you music, and then you can store it on the cloud.
Well,
Google distributes this application that you install and run. It's running right now. I ran it at home, too. Show
me the app. I want to see
that starts to copy over all of your music.
No, but Amazon does the same thing.
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, Amazon,
I believe it's the same. So how much storage do you actually have? Is it 20 gigabytes? Or?
They don't say. There's no limit.
Well, maybe that's well, okay. So they tell you the number of tracks you can store.
They don't say that either. I don't see that anywhere.
No, they did. I want to say it was 20,000 tracks.
Okay, that's a lot.
I think it's a lot. So 20,000, how much do you think 20,000 typical size of an MP3 song today? 5 megabytes?
It's not a lot. I don't know what it is.
Is it? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
5 megs?
I don't know. Then it looks like they might be re-encoding because I see a Fraunhofer license.
That might just be to what you need to store.
But see, for instance, okay, so here's this Galaxy tab. I haven't copied any music onto it. This is is just the music store, and everything that is on my hard drive now I can listen to. It will cache it. Yeah, it's like cloud. I guess it's like cloud. I
think it's very much like the Amazon thing. I think that Google gives you more storage space, and both of them have an Android client, and then both of them have a web client that works, elsewhere, like on PCs or Macs. Amazon does have this deal where if you buy music from their store, you can put it right into your online cloud instead of downloading it.
Right. I wish they could do that, but of course they're not. Right now, they're not selling anything, so that doesn't. Google Google also looks up album art, and they're doing some sort of CDDB stuff where they're or Grace Note stuff where they're actually
listen, we are so close because of this service and Amazon's, and then I think eventually Apple's, to not having to mostly download things to a device, to your PC. I do like one of the things that they've done with the Google Music where it will automatically cache things on the device. So you can listen to the stuff you listen to most while you're offline. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's the one negative, of course, of having cloud storage. But I love it that now, without ever copying any songs to this tablet, brand new tablet, I've got my entire music collection on here. I mean, and it plays well. It plays quickly. I'm not sure how well it would work at 3G or 4G, but it's pretty
like I said, I do this with the Amazon stuff. I think it's very similar.
It's very similar with the one exception that at this point Google doesn't seem to be selling.
Okay, but that just kind of means it's inferior.
It's not as good.
So the interesting thing about Google Music is that they went the Amazon route in the sense that they were unable or unwilling to sign contracts with the music industry.
It was clear they were watching Amazon and said, okay, let's go.
Yeah, and it was also clear that they were working with the music industry and were so taken aback by the requirements of these boobs that they just decided to go on without it. Because what Google wanted to do was be able to match your music collection to a database in the cloud and say, there's no reason for you to upload anything. We already have it all. So now we've compared your music collection.
Well, they even demoed something on stage, and because we interviewed Michael Robertson at mp3.com, who got sued out of existence because that's what he did. I was a little sensitized to that, and Google showed, because they were showing Android at home, and they were showing how they could use Android in devices. They showed a little ball that you have on your stereo system, and all you have to do is wave a CD with with a near field chip in it, an NFC chip in it, and it goes, oh yeah, I know that.
You own that one, yeah.
Yeah, you own that one. And that problem with that, of course, is exactly what you... Well, the truth is, Michael Robertson says...
You could have parties where people come over to your house and you take turns.
Well, that's true. Michael Robertson's position is he believes it's legal. He didn't have the money to fight Universal. In fact, talk about a nasty business practice. Edgar Bronfman, after he reduced the share value of mp3.com to almost nothing by suing them and winning or settling, bought them.
Right.
He got it down to $5 a share, and then he bought it. And Robertson told me that when they had their closing dinner, Bronfman said, "That was a pretty good strategy, huh?" I mean, they did this. Oh, it just makes me livid.
Evil.
So
Google got just ticked off with the music industry.
I think, but Google didn't go so far as doing the thing that we would all like, which is this same program that is now uploading everything could just scan it and say, yeah, I got that.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a lot faster.
That's where the stuff is heading. And actually, if I understand, if I'm reading the rumors correctly, Apple is uncharacteristically late to this particular market.
I think
the reason is they are working with the recording industry to enable this kind of thing. And that now, of course, what's going to happen on the Apple side is they'll have to charge for this because Apple will themselves be paying some licensing fee to the music industry.
Yeah.
Right. So you will have to pay. So it will be part of a service like MobileBee or whatever.
Just bugs the hell out of me. I bought this music. What's the difference between storing it on my local hard drive and storing it on Google or Amazon's hard drive?
Okay, but this again is an old school company, right? I mean, their argument today is the same as it's always been. It's like, yeah, we get that you owned this album on 8-track, but now we have this thing called a cassette or a CD or whatever.
Right.
You need to buy it again. That's our take on it is that you need to buy this again. Not that you walk in with your 8-track and now we just give you a brand new CD because you already paid for it. So this is kind of how this industry works, unfortunately.
I have to say though, I will use both Amazon and Google's cloud.
Oh, me too. Me too.
But I'm rather fond of.
Well, I already pay. I pay Google for extra storage, as we've discussed. I use Picasa Web.
Well, where do they say what the limit is? Because I couldn't find.
They said it during the keynote. I think the figure was 20,000 tracks.
Okay,
is what he said.
That's a lot. I mean, I have a pretty big collection. It's only 8,000.
Yeah, I mean, I have to look at mine. Mine's nowhere near 20,000. I mean, it's
that's a lot of songs.
I find out.
It's funny they don't say a storage size. I think that's
I mean, my music collection is 25 gigabytes.
Yeah, that's not much.
It is 3,800 items or less.
Right, easy peasy.
Yep.
So I think that's very interesting. They're doing it by number of songs. Here's the interesting question. Do you think they are, in fact, even storing these? I mean, truthfully, they're not storing. They're not storing a copy of Jack and Diane for every single person that uploads it.
Well, you want to be careful with that one, right? Because what if you have? You could test this easily enough. Just upload a borked song and see what happens to it. I mean,
guess you're right.
I suppose you could eliminate duplicates if they were literally duplicates, and there would be a lot of that stuff. The problem is if you rip a version of that song and I rip a version of that song and we use slightly different settings, the file size is different.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know.
I mean, I am uploading. It's still uploading. It's a lot. So I'm looking. And,
yeah, it will take a couple of days.
On this machine, 6,473 items, 41 gigs. So they're offering, almost 200 gigs of storage for free. That's a lot more. That's 10 times more Amazon. And it's for free.
It's not even close, yeah. No, that was the one complaint I had about Amazon was when you compared their pricing for the music to Google's pricing for what at the time was only, Photos, Gmail, and things like that, Google Docs. They were something like 4 times as expensive. I mean, and obviously what you want to see is Google enter the market, Apple enter the market, and then the prices will come down because they're going to have to compete with
I think it's interesting because Google, we thought Google would also announce a music store, and all they did is they added books to the, well, actually, I don't even know if that's new, but they have books and apps in the marketplace.
Well, they added a movie rental thing.
Movie rentals, that's right.
So, yeah, I mean, Google is moving slowly into this iTunes space in a way, right? So I think over the next year or whatever, they'll fill that out. And this is that ecosystem play that we talked about before where the one area where Android really falls short of iOS is that ecosystem stuff.
Yeah.
So this is them filling in those gaps. It's smart. Now, the problem is, to kind of bring it back to a Microsoft perspective, and maybe we should do this for each of these items, is, what does Microsoft offer that's anything like this? Obviously, they have the Zune stuff, but they don't have any notion of cloud storage of your stuff. They have a Zune Pass, which is probably the very closest thing.
Yeah, do you think users make a distinction between something like Zune Pass and cloud storage?
Well, they should, because Zune Pass is basically the entire Zune collection, 7 or 8 million songs, whatever it is.
Right.
Whereas Google Music is your collection uploaded.
So it's superior. The Microsoft solution is superior.
It's also a lot more expensive though, because you're paying $15. I mean, $15 a month is very expensive. Now, granted, you're getting $10 of that back in a sense, if you know, because you get the free 10 downloads, and that's
right.
The equivalent of $10. But you know, even at $5 a month, you're talking about $60 a year. $60 minus 0 is $60. So it's $60 more expensive. You know, I mean, it's more expensive.
You're good at math.
I was hoping you were going to help me out there.
Math is hard.
You know, I guess the point here being they don't really have anything. And the reason this is a problem is there are certain digital media solutions that are available, you know, obviously on the Xbox 360 and on Windows Phone and on Windows itself. But I think that this stuff, what Amazon's doing, what Google's doing, and what Apple is most likely doing, almost certainly doing, are more forward-leaning. You know, and this is another one of those areas where other companies are seizing the initiative, and you don't even hear rumors about Microsoft doing anything in this field. And if I think if Microsoft is truly serious about consumers, which I doubt, they would be doing something like this.
One thing that Microsoft really did right with Windows Phone is have a hardware platform that's standard across all the phones with slight variations, but you have a certain amount of processors. You can have different amounts of memory, but they specify the minimums, and they're pretty heady minimums. Right.
At least
so when you buy a Windows Phone, you know you're getting some, and you know what version. Well, of course, there's only really one version, but you
definitely know which version, Leo.
There's and eventually you'll all get mangified, but Google's kind of addressing this, I think, more looking at Apple than Microsoft, but saying we're going to try to solve this fragmentation issue as well.
Yeah, so the Android announcements were very interesting because that's the #1 complaint, and it's a valid complaint about Android is the fragmentation. So you have hundreds of devices from numerous manufacturers being sold by every wireless carrier on Earth. They all have different versions of Android. Some of them are updated on a on a quick basis. Most are not. Some are never updated.
Right.
So, and then actually, I would say Google added to the fragmentation by announcing Honeycomb, which was a tablet-only version of Android that had all these extra features.
Yeah.
And they had no clear notion of, or at least they didn't communicate one at the time, of when those features, if ever, would make their way down to the phone, and if so, how, through what version of the OS and so forth. So they addressed all that stuff at Google I/O this year. This past week. And there'll be, they talked about an interim update to Honeycomb 3.1, which is not entirely relevant. But they talked about a future version of Android called Ice Cream Sandwich, which will be available for both smartphones and tablets, and tie the OS together, much like Apple's done with iOS, and much like many people wish Microsoft would do. And maybe they will do in Windows 8, perhaps, let's say. But to the fragmentation issue, I don't know what they call this. It's an initiative or a quorum or what the heck it is.
Begging
but it's
and pleading.
Well, no, I mean, it's sort of an optional opt-in kind of thing for some of the first-tier Android handset makers, the wireless carriers, who will agree that when they release a device that it will be updated with new versions of the Android OS for at least 18 months, right? Which is most of the lifetime of a typical wireless contract, right? 2 years. And I think it's reasonable, right? So that if you, you buy a Android handset in January 2011, and for the next 18 months, you get whatever versions of Android come out, 3.1, 3.2, 4.0, whatever it is. And then 18 months later, maybe you do, maybe you don't, right? But by that point, you're sort of starting to think about the next phone anyway. And so it seems reasonable. And I think what this is going to do, this doesn't completely solve the problem, because frankly, Android has to be true to itself, which is it's an open system. So it has to have this notion that companies can do what they want to do with it. So there'll always be those companies that don't do this. I even expect to see some companies that agree that do this for certain devices, but not for others. I think we're going to see some of that. But I think for mainstream Android buyers, maybe they'll have a logo or something, or the update guaranteed logo or something, whatever they call it. This will hopefully remove some of those question marks for people. So I think it's a smart idea. And it brings it closer to Windows Phone. Windows Phone being that not so happy medium, but some medium of some kind between the Wild West of Android and then the very strict, rigorous update mentality over on the iOS side, because they control the whole thing. So Smart. I think it was a smart move on their part. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think so. We'll see if the it's like herding cats to herd carriers. We'll see how the carriers
but if you look at the list of companies that agreed to do this, it does include a lot of them. So we'll see. We'll see.
We shall see. Let's see, what else did they announce? Oh, let's talk about Chrome, because that was yesterday's stuff. What do you think of these crap books? I mean, Chromebooks.
Well, I'm actually, it's funny. I have one of the original, the CR48.
I do too.
And it's not that great, right? I mean, it's.
What if we're small and cheap?
Well, actually, that's not the problem. The problem is you can't bring it anywhere, because if you're in a situation where you're offline, you can't get anything done. So the way it works today is if you were on a plane and the plane didn't have Wi-Fi, you would have this lump of plastic and metal that could do nothing. So that's a problem. So they addressed that partially by announcing that their first-tier services would all be offline capable by sometime this summer. So you could do things like read and compose emails through Gmail on one of these things, or I guess elsewhere as well. Google Docs and Google Calendar. They said that most applications, meaning the web apps, right, that you run on this thing, and also most games would be offline capable. So if you have, Angry Birds, which they announced at the thing, you could play it offline on a plane, and it would work. And that's good. So that's all good. But I think that addressing that was smart. They addressed some of the other stuff around local storage. There's a file manager. They have this notion of open plugins where people can write add-ins for the system where they can integrate certain functionality with online services. So, for example, if the one they use their own services as example. So, you plug in an SD card from your camera, you can download these things to the device. It has a limited amount of on-device storage, but you can also upload it automatically to Picasa Web, right? So, if you were Flickr or a third-party developer, I guess, who wanted to support Flickr independently, you could write an add-in for this thing where it would go to Flickr instead. So I think that was smart, and they're supporting local opening of obvious document types, PDF, Word doc, image files, of course. You can play movies, and it's fine. It's kind of basic looking, I guess, but it's fine. I think the big question here is whether, after decades of using pretty rich computer systems, right? Whether we're talking about Windows PCs or Macs, whether mainstream America or the world is ready for something that is essentially a web browser wrapped with a computer around it. So it is true that most of us probably spend most of our time interacting with a computer while online. My usage is a little different because I'm a writer. So I tend to use a set of local applications, but I look at my taskbar here, and what I see are a lot of online stuff and a lot of room for more online stuff. So I use iTunes today because I have these Apple devices, but if that stuff was available in the cloud, I would be all over that. I do use Gmail and Google Calendar, some blogging things. I use Google News and the Amazon Cloud Player. We were talking about Facebook and Netflix and whatever. I mean, a lot of this stuff is online. So I don't know. I'm actually a little more. I think they may be onto something in a way. If you accept that people are buying iPads because they want a simpler computing experience, there's something to be said for these Chromebooks as well, right? Because they offer the keyboard and the screen type that people who use laptops are used to. So it is a computing experience where you can create things and do all that kind of stuff. And they're inexpensive enough.
Well, that's the key. Are they inexpensive enough? I mean, these are basically netbooks. Wouldn't you just buy a netbook at the same price?
Well, a netbook is not acceptable for running Windows because an Atom processor is just too slow. The question is whether an Atom processor is okay for running just a web browser.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. I mean,
essentially. I think that, well, then it becomes okay. I don't know that anyone questions the cost of an iPad because it has a 1 gigahertz whatever processor. I think what people do is they use it and they say, wow, this thing's really snappy. So we'll have to see. I mean, did you get a chance to use a Chromebook?
No, not the new ones, no.
So That's what I'm curious about. The new version, the new devices, the ones that they've announced, that will cost anywhere from $350 to $500, I guess. They have a dual-core Atom processor, which is okay. Well,
what's in that CR48 we have? Isn't it the same?
It's a single-core Atom processor.
So it's even slower.
Yeah.
I found it usable.
I thought it was fine. Yeah, I thought it was.
I called these crap books yesterday on TWiT. I said, we've seen this before. Who needs a netbook, let alone a less powerful netbook? But somebody emailed me and I said, hey, what about schools? And you know what? This is a good platform for schools because it's a constrained platform, but it does everything.
And by the way, I think it's the important distinction here is you're not trying to cram what is essentially a very large and heavy operating system, i.e. Windows, into substandard hardware. Right. In the same way, by the way, if you could somehow load Windows onto an iPad, I bet it would run like crap.
Yeah.
The reason it works well is because these things were optimized to work together. So
I wonder why you would buy, say, a Chromebook over, say, an iPad.
Well, because you have different needs. In other words,
I guess they're different.
Their positioning is, like you said, at educational institutions, also at governments and at businesses, right? They have nice, pretty low subscription pricing for those guys. I think that those plans make a lot of sense.
$20 a month for students, and I think that is attractive to a school.
I could picture schools adopting these things en masse, assuming during a testing phase.
I had to think, frankly, the school I'm on the board of the high school that my kids go to. And they matriculate and they get a MacBook, $1,000, the white MacBook. Yeah. And they have that for all 4 years. And I think that's very forward-looking. But I have to think for half that cost or less.
For less than half that.
Plus it saves the school money on infrastructure.
With 3G, which is very interesting.
Right. And it saves the school money on infrastructure because I've been trying to get them to move to the cloud. They have all these.
By the way, infrastructure, assuming, now we've not seen this, but assuming that their web-based console does what they say it does, right? Assuming that it's easy and comprehensive, that it allows you to manage the users, the devices, the apps, and I guess the software itself, the updating and so forth.
Of course, I'm sure they do.
And group policies, right?
Right.
Very, very important, right? If this stuff actually works, this would be a huge win for especially smaller businesses, but smaller businesses, let's say, and for educational institutions where money is so tight. You can give out these $1,000 MacBooks. You don't really give them out, but someone pays for them. And what's the management for that?
It's murder.
How do you ensure that guy is not installing crapware on his machine?
This is the management. Google.com/Chromebook. Here's the management console.
Oh, they have pictures of it. Okay.
They have it. Oh no, I guess it's just policies. It's a list.
So I'm curious to look at this, and
it looks good.
The way I think of it now is I look at my own kids who are fairly young, and they do have netbooks, and for them netbooks are okay, and they have basic word processing needs, and they, my son spends a lot of time on YouTube, and he's on Facebook now actually, because he's 13, and they do. My daughter plays games on Flash websites and so forth, and so they do these things. They have very limited needs. A Chromebook is the same price as a netbook. It has actually in all cases a bigger screen. Would it be okay for them? Maybe. I mean, this is not a clear victory, but it's something to consider. And the fact that we're even considering this suggests that Microsoft has something they need to address here.
Right.
I mean, this is It wasn't too long ago, remember, that we were all questioning why Google needed to have Android and Chrome. And that wouldn't it make more sense maybe for them to use Android and that Chrome should just be the browser and all that kind of stuff. But they're talking about such things as paid web apps. A paid app, remember when Apple came out with their App Store beta for the Mac, remember one of the beautiful things about it was you were no longer restricted to the number of installs you could do, right? That's one of the things they got with that. It's a good idea. It's very user-centric. A Chrome web store, whatever they call it, the Chrome web app store, whatever it is, where you could buy these web apps and get the same thing is a good idea for the same reason, right? Assuming that the web app has all of the functionality and the user experience that you're looking for, if you can pay a small amount for something, and then always have access to it simply by virtue of logging into a browser. That's pretty wonderful. I mean, that's neat. That's a neat thing. So I like the idea of not having my data tied to a particular hardware device, right? You know, people fear the cloud in the same way that old people fear ATM machines or whatever because it's a new thing to them. But having your data up in the cloud, assuming it's secure and so forth and all that. But again, you have this logon where you can get to it from any computer. It's not as traumatic when the thing breaks or you lose it or it gets stolen because you know you can log on to the next one and everything's back where it was. This is something we don't have on the Windows side. We really don't.
Yeah, so there.
I'm not saying it's better, but there are ideas there that are better.
So you convinced me. I'm not going to call it a crap book anymore.
Well, you know, the thing is, I've said this. No, I've not used one, right? So I will get one of these new ones, and it will come in, and I'll use it for 2 days. How different
could it be from the CR48? It's going to be like
that. What I'm eager to see is if there's any perceivable performance difference, how that offline and local storage stuff works, right? I'm very curious about that. There are things that this thing will not be good for. For example, if I guess you could technically rent a movie and download it to the paltry amount of storage that's on the device. But the truth is,
yeah, I mean, like on the CR48, it's like 6 gigs. There's nothing.
There's nothing there. So you're talking. I mean, you can't. It can't do. You know, it's not a full-featured laptop. You know, you can't get it with a hard drive.
Right.
So,
but I'm thinking for the school it'd be perfect.
Yeah, and this is an interesting division of work and play, too, if you want to go that route. So for my kids or for any kids or for kids in school who get these things at school, they have this notebook that they open up and they have it as a keyboard and they do work on it, email and all that stuff. And then maybe they have an iPad or other kind of tablet device or a smartphone or some combination of these things. And they use that stuff for their personal stuff, including watching those movies and playing the game.
Mom and Dad can pay for that one.
Yep.
And the school has all sorts of issues. I actually disagree with them, but they block Facebook. It'd be a lot easier to do that by giving them a constrained netbook.
Because, by definition, it's centrally managed, and that's one of the things you could block if that's what you wanted to do.
Without having, you know, I go in there as a trustee, and I can't get on Facebook, and it bugs me because they've blocked it. You know, they use WebSense, and they block it school-wide. This way, they could have different permissions for different students. A senior gets more permissions than a freshman, and that kind of thing. I think it's very interesting.
I do too.
Google TV still a dog, but maybe better. Maybe better. I want to put honeycomb on it.
I watched some sessions that they had about for developers. In fact, I spent most of the past 2 days with Google I/O just streaming live, which I really like.
I love that. I think every conference should do that from now on.
Yep.
I know it puts us out of business a little bit because
yeah, it does. But
I don't care.
It was nice. You know, I didn't go, and I feel like I wish I kind of did, and it was nice to be able to at least be part of it. But you know, Google TV, I guess I give them credit. They really seem to believe that this is workable. It's very obvious that first gen of devices they put out was horrible, and that they needed to make some changes.
Horrible.
And they're doing that. And they've also kind of rallied around a very smart notion, which is that, you know, Android developers are numerous, you know, right. So they're making it easier for these guys to bring their stuff over and trying to educate them about the differences between, okay, now we have a touch screen on this little device and on a tablet, but now, you know, we're not going to have this interface where you walk up and touch the screen, so you have to have a remote, and here are the differences and so forth. And I think if they do it right, and I'm still a little dubious about this, but there was talk about in Android 4, or whatever they're going to call Ice Cream Sandwich, that developers would be able to easily, or with just a little bit of work, create an application that would run on either a phone or a tablet, and that it would do some sort of smart layout decisions for them, and that perhaps that's something they could do for the TV as well. So it would be interesting to have this one OS to rule them all kind of thing, which is where Apple's at, or actually heading, because obviously Apple TV is a different thing right now, but you can see how they're heading in that direction. And I think it makes sense on the Microsoft side for Microsoft to also head in that direction for all of their, you know, Windows on PCs, Windows on tablets, Windows on phones, Windows on TV, et cetera. So hopefully Microsoft is...
it's funny that you should say that, because that was my immediate reaction is, we've heard this strategy before.
Yes, we have.
I've heard this strategy before.
Sure. Well, at Apple, I'm sorry, at Google, it's Android everywhere.
Right.
Unless, Chris, you're talking about Chrome.
Well, that's confusing.
It is confusing. And by
that.
the way, also confusing, why is it that the web browser on Android is not Chrome? It's not.
It's not? It's
no
Chrome-like?
I heard that numerous times. It's completely separate.
It's WebKit? What the hell is it?
I don't know. They kept saying that. They
Chrome.
were trying to drive home the point that this thing is not Chrome. It should be, just so we're clear.
Well, they could just call it Chrome. I mean, Apple calls their Safari.
They could call it Chrome. That's true. I think the issue maybe is that, I don't know what the issue is. I was just saying, it's possible that the Android one came first. It was just a separate thing, and I don't know. I don't know what the issue is. I expect them to consolidate that.
They say now you work for Google, and that's why the show is no longer the Apple show.
I work for Google.
It's now the Google show.
Wow.
No, you know what? Paul is a technology journalist.
No, I listen. There are shows that are going to happen this year, some of which have happened, that are important. You know, Google I/O is important. When Apple has their WWDC event, that's going to be important. Next week is Tech Ed. It's important. It's business oriented, so it's not going to be as exciting to individuals, maybe. But Microsoft is also going to have some kind of a Windows Developer Conference, or whatever they call it, what used to be PDC, this fall, where they focus on Windows 8. That's important. You know, this stuff is all important, and these things don't happen in isolation or in a vacuum. They happen within the context of each other. So I think it's important. I always have thought it was important to make sure you don't have tunnel vision and that you understand what the other people are doing, because it's either better or worse than what, you know, your company is doing. And, you know, it's important to understand the differences.
What would Steve Ballmer do? That's what we have to constantly ask ourselves.
Right.
Let's take a break. Come back with more. Paul Thurrott, Leo Laporte. We will talk more about Windows. Tech Ed is coming up. And by the way, the I'm a PC ads are back. We'll take a look at those. But first, and of course, our Windows Weekly tip of the week. But first, a word from Carbonite. Back up! Okay. Thanks, Carbonite. And if there were but one thing I could say, you know, my daughter's coming back from college, and I'm really thrilled. She's coming back with her laptop. That was never for sure. You know how these things are in college. They get lost. So before she went to college, I put Carbonite on there, which is kind of neat because that's actually how Carbonite started. David Friend, who was a serial entrepreneur, brilliant guy. He created the ARP synthesizer company out of college. He was resting on his laurels. I think that's what they call that. And his daughter was in college and called him and said, I lost my hard drive crashed and I lost my thesis. Help me, Daddy. And he said, there's got to be a better way. This is terrible. He literally created Carbonite for his college kid daughter so that she'd never lose anything. And now I'm using it for my college kid daughter. And I love it. Even if she didn't lose the laptop, the hard drive didn't crash. Even then, she could still go to the library, use the computer, Mac or PC there, and see her data, work on her paper, save it back to Carbonite, go home. It's kind of, you know, it's like Dropbox in that, except that it's less than $5 a month for unlimited storage, everything on your internal drive. So it's very economical. And of course, if the worst happens, as it always does, inevitably, at some point, you can get that data back so quickly. Carbonite's automatic. You don't have to think about it. Whenever you're online, it's safe. It's easy to use for a laptop, for a desktop. It's got to be part of your overall disaster planning. And I think just a really easy way to do this, just go to Carbonite.com. Actually, if you go there right now and use the offer code WINDOWS, you could try it free for 2 weeks, see if it works for you. It does rely on high-speed internet. It will not slow your system down or the internet down, but that means it's going to be nice. It's not going to eat all your bandwidth. So if you've got a lot of data, it'll take a couple of weeks or longer. So it's good to get this first 2 weeks free, just see how it's working. If you decide to buy, use the code WINDOWS again. You'll get 14 months for the price of 12. $59 a year, but in your case, just for you, 14 months, okay? Carbonite.com. You got to back it up to get it back. Make sure you do that. And do it right with Carbonite. Tech Ed. What is Tech Ed? It's coming up.
I don't know. Some Microsoft thing.
I hate that. Let's talk about Google some more.
Yes. Well, Tech Ed is Microsoft's humongous trade show for IT pros, essentially.
Isn't that nice?
Yes. There's actually Tech Eds all over the world. I mean, the big one is the North American version, but there's a big one in Europe every November as well. It's actually usually a little later in the year. i.e. June instead of May. But I think, last year they had it in New Orleans. I'm just guessing. Maybe it was just availability of the conference halls or whatever. But it was so hot in New Orleans last year.
You mean hot as in warm, not hot as in sexy?
Right. Well, it was both. It was New Orleans, but
it's sexy.
It was just brutally hot. And I think, they looked at this year where they're having it in Atlanta, and they said, maybe we need to move this up a little so we don't all roast, like.
Yeah, Atlanta can get really hot.
But, in New Orleans, you would walk out the door to go up the street, and it would, the heat and the humidity would hit you like this wall.
Right.
I mean, it was just absolutely unbelievable, So, I can't talk too much about some of this stuff, but, there's a reviewers workshop occurring on Sunday, and my company is involved with some Microsoft training stuff on Sunday night. And, of course, we have their keynote addresses, and there'll be product announcements and, vision announcements and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have a lot more to say about Tech Ed next week.
Cool.
But that's happening, starting Sunday, I guess.
So the I'm a PC.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was going to ask. It occurred to me I'm flying home Thursday, but actually I fly home Thursday morning. So
we can rejigger.
No,
I'm open to rejiggering.
No, I don't know why you have to keep changing things. No, thank you. It's fine.
So I think the I'm a PC campaign started 2008, right? I believe.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm looking on YouTube and I see going back to spring of 2008. So it's 3 years ago.
Yeah, I'm a PC was kind of the third or maybe even the fourth in a series of responses to those Apple ads, actually, right? They started with the Seinfeld ads, I think, was the first ones. And
those were not good.
Yeah, but, I think I always liked the I'm a PC ads because I felt like they struck a chord. They talked about the diversity of the PC world and how that mirrors the diversity of the real world, and that in the real world there are lots of choices, and that this was why Windows PCs were better than Macs, very specifically. And they kind of ran their course. I mean, they were I'm a PC ads for probably a year or more, and some of them were really nice. And then they just kind of went away. So I guess they're bringing them back. And I've only seen the one. I don't know if there's more than that one. But the one they have is where this woman is convinced that PCs haven't gotten any better and there's no reason to buy a new one.
Let's take a look at Julie in the PC store.
That is her house.
It is. It's her. This is like an actual person.
Is this well? Let me see it and let's see if this is the one I'm talking about.
Because I don't feel there's something out there.
She's British. Is this the one?
This is Julie. She won't shop for a new PC because
I don't feel there's something out there better than what I've got now.
So to show her what she's missing, we built a PC store in her house.
Oh, please.
Thanks for dropping in.
You've got to be kidding me. This isn't my house anymore.
Have a little look around.
Isn't that nice? Microsoft has invaded my home and turned it into a store.
Right, but you see...
I love Microsoft. Thank you.
The reason I think this is kind of brilliant is it latches onto something that I can't stand, but I have to admit is popular, which is the sort of reality TV stuff that we have going on today.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of Discovery Channel. Right?
Yeah, so it has that sort of vibe to it, And then, of course, what she discovers is that, there's a comment she makes later where it's like, oh, where's the tower? And it's like, no, the computer's built into the screen. And
let's play some more of that. Let's give Microsoft a little more airtime.
This one is touchscreen.
I like that. So there is no tower anymore. Wow. I admit I'm wrong.
Wow, Microsoft, you've invented... Oh, wait a minute. Apple did that about 10 years ago. Never mind.
Wait, hold on. Remember, it's not important that they invent it. It's only important that they popularize it.
Yeah, right. Apple sells no iMacs whatsoever.
On this discount book.
Where's the tower, she says.
There is a computer better than mine.
New PC.
Yeah, she's got...
I'm a PC, and I'm going to kill him.
Wait a minute. I don't know if that's really a felicitous way to end the commercial.
PC, and I'm going to kill him.
Why is she going to kill him?
Because she made her buy a new computer, and they
is that her
changed
husband?
Her house into a store. Yeah, this is the guy that's been trying to convince her that they need.
Oh, that wasn't clear from the beginning.
This is Julie.
It was her husband that did this to her.
Because
I don't feel there's something.
Oh, Julie and Russell focus group. I see. Yep. So this is where we introduce Russell.
Something out there better than what I've got now.
So to show
Russell's been trying to get her to buy a new computer.
Right.
Apparently, Russell doesn't work.
He's probably got this netbook thing or whatever that is not working so well.
Please, honey, can I buy a new computer?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to kill you, you sodden crumpet.
Yep.
Why are they British?
Maybe it's a British TV ad. I don't know. I think it's nice. I actually think it's a good ad. And by the way, you know,
it got my attention.
Unlike the other I'm a PC ads, there's no Mac thing going on anymore. This is more along the lines of just promoting sort of PC as a brand, if you will.
Right. PCs aren't as crappy as they used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Now with less suck.
Now less suckage. Where's the tower? Yeah. I like a tower, Julie.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that they're back. I think it's a strange ad. I don't, does Microsoft like tell the agencies to do this, or do they get weird ad agencies? I mean, what's the story? I'm going to kill him. That's as bad as Bill Gates wagging his butt at the end.
You know what? I honestly, I think that's absolutely okay, because it's the type of conversation that men and women have. I mean, it makes it real.
If he brought that home to my house, I'd kill him.
If I had $1 for every time my wife has threatened my life, I could have.
Look at that beautiful computer. It's an HP, isn't it?
That's HP.
HP. Yeah. Which, by the way,
Actually,
is a steak sauce in Great Britain.
It is, yeah.
It's a delicious steak sauce. So it's not a tower anymore. It's a steak sauce. Do you use LastPass? Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've been an early proponent of this.
I love LastPass, yeah.
You know, I've been amused. Maybe amused isn't the right word. Depressed. Maybe that's the right word.
Amused, depressed, one of the two.
One of the two. You know, by the reaction I've gotten from people over this maybe LastPass issue, you know, that they were very upfront about, very quick to fix, very quick to investigate, and very quick to help people do the right thing to, you know, secure their accounts. But I get email from people who say, well, now that LastPass has been completely destroyed by this.
No, not so.
You know, I need some other thing, or I've adopted this other thing, and doesn't this prove the lie of cloud computing, or the baloney of, you know, saving all your stuff in one place with one password, yada yada yada. You know, I'm sorry. I just want to be very clear about this without rehashing the whole story about what happened. But the LastPass story, as far as I'm concerned, confirms everything I ever thought about this service,
yes,
i.e. that it is the right thing to do and the right way to do it and the right people to do it with. So. Yeah. I find that their response, if you were to make a chart, you know, or an end-to-end type of thing where Sony is on one end, you'd put LastPass at the other, because those are the ways that you can respond to a problem like this. Sony did it the wrong way and LastPass did it the right way. I'm sorry, but this just makes me more sure of this decision. I'm very happy with the way that LastPass reacted to this stuff, and we'll continue using it and recommending it. I think I love LastPass. I'm glad to see, you know, when the chips are down, that's how you find out about the character of people, but also apparently of online services. So, you know, these guys did the right thing, and I just don't think there's any other reaction you can have to this. I'm confused that hasn't been the reaction of some people. So, I just wanted to be clear about that.
Well, I think you have been. You've been eminently clear. You know, it doesn't suck. Hey, let's take a break. Come back. You have a Windows Weekly Tip of the Week.
Mm-hmm.
You have which has something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A surprise.
A surprise.
You have the Windows 7 app pick of the week, which has another surprise, the same surprise. Windows.
Listen, I'm sorry. That was like, you are lazy, Paul. Is what it was.
Well, 2 tips from 1 bit, but that's okay.
Okay.
Because they tie together nicely.
They do tie together.
It's really quite brilliant what you've done.
Okay.
Anyway, we got a lot more coming up. Just a bit. But first, let's talk about Squarespace.com, the secret behind exceptional websites. What? Are you playing organ music? Have you had an organ in front of you all this time and I didn't even know?
Wow.
Paul Thurrott sitting in his Hammond B3. Play us a riff. Was that me or was that you?
That was me.
Okay. I thought I heard organ music.
Yeah. Okay. I'll explain it later.
Oh, that's cool. Paul is a he's a man of mystery. That's for sure. Squarespace is the place to go. I'm going to load Squarespace right now. Let me hit return. Squarespace is the place to go to create your new website. It's the secret behind exceptional websites, they say, and I have to say I agree. It is hosting I got to be very clear because this is what you're getting. You're getting web hosting, the best web hosting I've ever seen. People often ask me, who's a good web host? This is it. But unlike other web hosts, you don't get a terminal command. You don't get, PHP MyAdmin. You get the Squarespace software running on their hosting. And they're tightly coupled to give you very high-speed performance. Really an exceptional system, including stats to die for, the ability to post by iPhone or iPad and moderate. I love how they can import your data from any existing blog on WordPress, Blogger, Movable Type, or TypePad. Those are the kind of the big 4 APIs, so it'll work on many, 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 many more blogs or websites. And it preserves everything. The post URLs are the same. They still work. All the links are the same. So this is a great way to try it free. Click that green Try It Free button you'll find on every Squarespace page. Sign up. All you need is a name, a password, and an email address, a name for your site. And you're good. You're good to go. For 2 weeks free, you can try every feature. The fantastic templates that don't look templated, the form builder, the forums, social integration, and more. And then Squarespace is as little as $12 a month. In fact, if you sign up for a year, you get up to 20% off savings. So the annual plans are really good. Go look at the pricing. No surprises here. I just think Squarespace is fantastic, and I want you to try it right now. Squarespace.com for free /Windows. Squarespace, the secret behind exceptional websites. We use it for our Inside Twit blog, and boy, we could not be happier. Just love it. Our Windows Weekly Tip of the Week is kind of interesting. I didn't know this would work. I'm surprised.
I didn't either. I'm embarrassed it didn't occur to me to even check on this one, but I got an email from Rodrigo Gomez Morales who said that you can run the recently released and free version of Angry Birds for Chrome inside of IE9. If you go to the link from within Chrome, if you just copy that link, it won't work. But if you go to chrome.angrybirds.com in IE9, it actually works, and it's full-featured, full speed, everything. It works great. You can also do this in Firefox and Safari, although you get diminished results in both. There's some performance issues in Firefox, and I just tried it.
So it's HTML5, I guess.
Right. So they obviously, all these browsers support some different subset of HTML5. So it so happens that it works fine in IE9 for whatever reason. It mostly works fine in the other browsers. The organ music you heard was me trying it in Safari.
I didn't recognize it. That's fine. I thought I knew all the Angry Birds themes.
Yeah, so it does work in Safari, but it has it's not tearing, but you can see the lines around the graphic tiles that they use to create the background. So it's a little less seamless looking. So I don't see any reason to do this in Safari, but obviously you can just do it in Chrome. But well, anyway, they released it for Chrome, and it's kind of a cool version because it has some additional levels that aren't available in other versions, and it's free. Yeah, I don't know if that is that temporary. Did they? I don't remember that.
I mean, there. Angry Birds is free on Android because they put ads in it.
Yeah, although there's actually, if you buy it through Amazon, you can pay for it. I think it's $1 or $2, and you get a version without ads.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I had a tip months ago where there's a version of Angry Birds for Windows that you get through that Intel App Up store.
Right. That was free, right?
No, I think you paid for it. It might have been $2 or $3 or something. So, and it was the difference between that version and the one that you run in a browser is that the native client version actually runs full screen. So if you have a widescreen display like most of us do, you actually get kind of a widescreen view of the playfield, which is actually pretty neat. But obviously, it's hard to beat free. So we have a free version now.
Free is a good price. And speaking of Angry Birds.
Yeah, so I cheaply made this my app pick as well.
No, that's efficiency. That's just efficiency.
Because in either of these browsers, in Chrome or in IE9, you can actually pin, remember, this is a Windows 7 capability.
Right.
Or a Chrome capability in that case. You can pin a shortcut to these web apps to your taskbar in Windows 7. So you can have this Angry Birds application, sort of an application with air quotes around it, like a web application, running side by side with your other applications. So you can install it, so to speak, on Windows 7 using one of those browsers. So either one should work fine.
Amazing.
It is amazing.
It's amazing. Now, this Windows Phone Pick is a program I've used on iPhone and love.
Yeah, this is an awesome one. So, again, it's an unfortunate reality of the first year of Windows Phone that we're going to have a bunch of picks over time that are, people who have iPhones or Android devices are going to say,
we had that before.
But I think it further formalizes the notion of Windows Phone as a viable alternative that these things are coming. So the game is called Enigmo. It's kind of a classic 3D puzzle game. I threw this note in here because I wasn't sure if anyone would remember this game, but there's kind of a relentless quality to this that reminds me of the game Lemmings, which was an old Amiga game.
Lemmings.
Actually. It's got that kind of quality to it in that, you're eventually going to be overrun and unable to get through the puzzle, but it's a cool game and a nice time waster. So.
Always liked Enigma.
Yeah, good thing to check out.
Yeah. And finally,
so I didn't have time this week, but there's something called Plex that I'm looking at. Hopefully
Plex
next
is
week.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I wanted people to know about it so they could look at it and then give me some feedback on it. But my quick, I'm sort of previewing next week's pick first because I want to explain why. Plex, the way I take Plex is it's a way to overcome the limitations that occur between when you have a media library and you want to use it on things that aren't necessarily compatible. So, for example, maybe you have a music collection, movie collection, whatever it is. You could go through the Apple ecosystem, but if you're not using an Apple TV out at your living room, or if you have an Android device instead of an iPhone, or if you have all these kind of devices that are incompatible, then how do you use all this stuff together? I happen to use Windows Home Server, which is fine for storing stuff, including digital media. But how do I get that content from the server to an Apple TV, or to an iPod Touch, or to an Android device, or whatever? So Plex is essentially, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the way I look at it is sort of a cross-platform media server with clients for all of the popular platforms, essentially. So there are Windows clients, iPhone clients, Android clients, and all that kind of stuff. And it's basically a way to move this stuff around. Plus, they have some nice management functionality and metadata cleanup and album art and all that stuff. So that's something to check out. That's for next week. So that's probably going to be my pick. I wanted enough people to look at it. And I will be looking at it as well. So in the meantime, this week's pick in a way, and this is interesting because of, I have the wrong name in the, it's actually the Amazon Cloud Player, not the Google Cloud Player.
Well, both of them exist.
Both of them exist, but Amazon Cloud Player is something that anyone can access.
Does it work on Windows Phone?
No. And that's the thing. So when it first came out, when they first announced it it was about a month and a half ago, they have a web client that works on Windows PCs, obviously, and Macs. And then they have a native client for Android. Okay, so if you have one of those things, you're fine. But if you wanted to use it with another device, like an iPhone or an iPad particularly, you couldn't because there was no client, and that web client would not work. But what Amazon did was they updated the web client now so that it works on iOS devices. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can now use this client on those systems as well. And for whatever it's worth, I put a note there because I actually do use Amazon Cloud Player to play music on my Windows PC from the cloud. But it's not a native client, it's the web client. And I've just pinned it to my taskbar, because that's one of those neat little capabilities. So that you get in Windows 7. So this thing looks and works like an application, but it's really just the web page, right? And it works kind of like iTunes or whatever. So this is now something you can do. I wrote Google. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to fix that. But with the Amazon Cloud Player now, if you have an iPhone or an iPad,
yeah, iOS. I don't know if Apple did something or Google did something. My suspicion is Apple did something. I mean, Amazon.
I think Amazon. Yeah, that was my understanding. It was that Amazon did.
Yeah,
something.
I can't imagine Apple in any way said, "Oh, we should fix this."
We right before we launched our service, we thought we'd fix our devices so they worked with your service.
Let's make this better. What do you say?
Sounds like something Apple would do.
Hey, very exciting stuff, my friend Paul Thurrott. He is the guy at Windows SuperSite.
I am the guy.
SuperSite. He's the guy, the lonely man at the SuperSite for Windows. He's a blogger. He's been a
wow. It's like
doesn't that sound like a diminutive?
It did. It was very. I actually twitched a little in my heart when you said that.
Oh. Well, hey, I'm a podcaster.
Paul is a street urchin. Paul is a commoner, a plebe, if you will.
Paul is a commoner. No, I think podcaster and blogger are both diminutives, and I've been lobbying against both for years.
Sure.
I'm a twit. Now, see, that's something you could say with pride.
Right.
We're both twits.
We are twits. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many people come up to me all the time and say,
"Did you not know what that meant?
What is wrong with you? Why does your shirt say I'm a twit on it?
Right.
Is there something wrong with you?" No, my friend, there's something very right.
There's something very right. That's right.
Paul, you'll find him at SuperSite for Windows, winsupersite.com, Windows IT Pro. Of course, he's a news editor there. And don't forget. I just forgot. Don't forget. You can get his great books, the Windows Phone 7 Vista Secrets. They're all at better bookstores.
I really need you to stop doing promos for me. I don't know why. I don't know what I've done.
What did you do to deserve this, says Paul Thurrott. And the Delphi 5.3 Super Bible.
Good old days.
Still have it. Still love it. Paul, so next week,
if you read a chapter a night,
you'll be done in sometime in the year 2012.
Yes, some number of years will have expired.
2014. You're going to go to Tech Ed. You will be back from Tech Ed next week, and we shall talk at our usual time. That is 11 a.m. Pacific, but for you, 2 p.m. Eastern at live.twit.tv. Tune in live, but if you miss it, and I know many of you actually have jobs, so you, unlike me and Paul, so you can get that on the Twit site, twit.tv/dubdub for Windows Weekly. Oh, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. It's been wonderful. Okay.
Oh, God.
Thanks, Paul. Let's see. In order to do that, I have to do this and then that. And it is slightly higher on the right. Ah! Paul eyes! Paul eyes!
You look like a lizard. Oh, that's me. Oh, I do this. Here we go.
Don't you move. I'll move.
God. If we were to have a child.
He's got your eyes, Paul.
That ugly little bastard. I got to tilt my head the right way, too. I'll never get TV.
How does this work?
Is there someone in there?
I saw you on the TV.
I can still see others.
I see you on the TV.